A bullied teen stood up for a kid, not realizing the victim's dad was the school principal. That single act of courage would change everything for 17-year-old Marcus Wilson, though he couldn't have known it on that cold November morning as he ducked his head against the biting wind and limped through Westlake High's front gates. The purple-yellow bruise blooming across his cheekbone told its own story. 3 days old now, the colors had deepened overnight, a watercolor masterpiece of pain that Marcus had stopped trying to hide. What was the point? Everyone knew he was Damon Reeves' favorite punching bag. The teachers pretended not to notice. The students pretended not to see. And Marcus had learned to pretend it didn't matter. His breath fogged in the frigid morning air as he tugged his too-thin jacket tighter around his lanky frame. Another winter, another hand-me-down that didn't quite fit. The jacket had belonged to his older brother Jason before he'd escaped to college 2 years ago, leaving Marcus alone to navigate the minefield of high school and their father's unpredictable moods. The school hallway buzzed with the usual Monday morning chaos. Locker doors slamming, overlapping conversations, forced laughter, and the constant tap-tap-tap of thumbs on phone screens. Marcus kept to the edges, shoulders hunched, eyes down, making himself as small and unnoticeable as possible. A skill perfected over years of practice. "Yo, Wilson!" The voice cut through the hallway noise like a blade. Marcus froze, his stomach dropping as though he'd missed a step on a staircase. "Damon." He considered pretending he hadn't heard, but that would only make things worse later. Reluctantly, he turned. Damon Reeves leaned against a row of lockers, surrounded by his usual entourage. Captain of the wrestling team, with shoulders like small boulders and a perpetual smirk that teachers somehow mistook for charm. He beckoned to Marcus with 2 fingers. "Did you finish it?" Damon asked, voice deceptively light. "The calculus homework." Of course. Marcus had stayed up until 2 a.m., completing his own assignment, then doing a separate version for Damon that wouldn't be obviously copied, but would still earn him a passing grade. A delicate balance. "Yeah," Marcus mumbled, digging through his backpack. His fingers closed around the folded paper as a fresh wave of self-loathing washed over him. This was his life now. Homework mule, occasional punching bag, invisible the rest of the time. Damon snatched the paper, not bothering to thank him. "Better be right this time," he said, the threat implicit in his tone. Last month, Marcus had deliberately included a few errors, a small rebellion. The bruised ribs had taken weeks to heal. "It's right," Marcus assured him, already backing away, eager to escape. Hey, Damon called after him. "Nice face." His friends laughed on cue, the sound following Marcus down the hall like a shadow. The morning dragged by in a blur of lectures and sidelong glances at his bruised face. In English, they were discussing The Outsiders. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus. He sank lower in his seat as Mrs. Brennan waxed poetic about staying gold and the heroism of standing up for what's right. Easy for fictional characters with nothing real to lose. Lunch period arrived like a sentence. The cafeteria was Marcus's daily purgatory, a sprawling social battlefield where he had no allies. He clutched his brown paper bag, scanning the room for a quiet corner. The back table near the emergency exit had a single empty seat. Good enough. He kept his head down as he crossed the cafeteria, navigating between tables with practiced ease. Almost there. 3 more steps, a crash, and a collective "ooh" from nearby tables stopped him cold. To his right, a small boy, probably a freshman, was on his knees gathering scattered lunch items while chocolate milk spread across the floor like a muddy puddle. Standing over him was Tyler Evans, Damon's second in command, grinning as he deliberately stepped on a sandwich, grinding it into the linoleum. "Sorry, didn't see you there, shrimp," Tyler said, not sounding sorry at all. The boy didn't respond, just kept picking up his things, hands shaking slightly. Marcus should walk away. Keep moving. Not his problem. That's what survival at Westlake meant. Mind your own business, keep your head down, become invisible. But something about the boy's silence, the resigned slump of his narrow shoulders, struck a chord so deep within Marcus that he felt it reverberate through his chest. The boy had dark curly hair and wire-rimmed glasses that kept slipping down his nose as he reached for an apple that had rolled away. He was small for his age, dressed in clothes that seemed a size too big. Not hand-me-downs like Marcus's, but as if he was hoping to grow into them someday. Without making a conscious decision, Marcus found himself walking over. He knelt down, picking up a container of yogurt that had skidded beneath a nearby table, and handed it to the boy. "Here," he said quietly. The boy looked up, surprised. Behind the glasses, his eyes were a startling shade of blue. Intelligent, wary, and tinged with something Marcus recognized immediately. The same look he saw in his own mirror every morning. The look of someone who had learned to expect the worst. "Thanks," the boy whispered, taking the yogurt. "Problem, Wilson?" Tyler's voice hardened as he registered Marcus's interference. Marcus should back down. Walk away. Apologize. But for reasons he couldn't explain, even to himself, he stood up instead, positioning himself slightly in front of the younger boy. "Just helping him pick up his lunch," Marcus said, aiming for neutral but hearing the tremor in his own voice. Tyler stepped closer, crowding into Marcus's space. "Didn't know you two were friends. We're not?" The boy started to say, but Marcus cut him off. "Yeah, we are," Marcus said, the word surprising him as much as anyone. "So maybe back off." A hush fell over the nearby tables. No one spoke to Tyler Evans like that, especially not someone like Marcus Wilson. Tyler's face darkened, a flush creeping up his neck. "What did you just say to me?" Marcus's heart hammered against his ribs. His palms were sweaty and a voice in his head was screaming at him to backtrack, apologize, retreat. But another part of him, a part he barely recognized, held firm. "I said back off," Marcus repeated, his voice steadier this time. "He's just trying to eat lunch. Like everyone else." Tyler's eyes narrowed to slits. "You're dead, Wilson. You hear me?" "Dead." He glanced past Marcus to the younger boy. "Both of you freaks." But instead of escalating further, Tyler turned and stalked back to his table, where Damon and the others were watching the exchange with undisguised interest. Marcus knew he just painted a target on his back, even larger than the one he already wore. Whatever beating Damon had been planning for him would now be worse. The boy finished gathering his ruined lunch, then stood up. He was at least a head shorter than Marcus, his face solemn beyond his years. You shouldn't have done that," he said quietly. "Now they'll go after you too." Marcus almost laughed. "They already do," he said, gesturing to his bruised face. The boy studied the bruise with a clinical detachment that was somehow more disconcerting than pity. "That's a bad one. Have you iced it?" "It's fine." An awkward silence fell between them. The boy shifted his weight from one foot to the other, clutching what remained of his lunch. "I'm Noah," he finally said. "Noah Chen. Marcus Wilson." "I know," Noah said, then flushed slightly. "I mean, I've seen you around. You're in AP Physics, right? I've watched you in the lab sometimes. You're really good with the practical applications." Marcus blinked, genuinely surprised that anyone had noticed him for something positive. "It's just, I like building things," he mumbled, figuring out how they work. Noah nodded, a flicker of enthusiasm lighting his eyes. "Me too. I'm more into programming, though. I'm working on this game right now that..." He stopped abruptly, as if remembering where they were. The light in his eyes dimmed. "Anyway, thanks for..." "You know," Marcus glanced at Noah's tray. Most of his lunch was inedible now. The sandwich crushed, the milk spilled. Without thinking, he held out his own paper bag. "I've got extra," he lied. "We could share." It was a single peanut butter sandwich and an apple. All he'd been able to make with what was left in the kitchen that morning. But something about Noah's surprised, cautious smile made the offer worth it. They found a table in the far corner of the cafeteria, away from Tyler and Damon's group. Marcus split his sandwich in half, acutely aware of the eyes on them. For the first time in as long as he could remember, he wasn't eating lunch alone. Noah, it turned out, could talk. Once he overcame his initial shyness, words spilled out of him like water from a broken dam. He told Marcus about the game he was coding, about a book series he loved, about how he'd skipped 8th grade and started high school early. He spoke rapidly, hands moving to illustrate his points, as if afraid Marcus might lose interest if he didn't get all the words out quickly enough. "Sorry," he said abruptly, catching himself mid-explanation about algorithm structures. "I'm talking too much. My dad says I need to work on that." "It's okay," Marcus said, finding to his surprise that he meant it. There was something refreshing about Noah's unfiltered enthusiasm, so different from the careful, social dance everyone else performed. "Your dad sounds pretty understanding." A shadow crossed Noah's face. "He tries. It's just been the two of us since Mom died 3 years ago. Cancer," he added, answering the unasked question. "He works a lot. Important job." Marcus nodded, recognizing the familiar mix of pride and loneliness in Noah's tone. "My mom left when I was 10, he offered, surprised at himself for sharing something he rarely talked about. "She sends birthday cards sometimes. From Arizona." Noah didn't offer the usual platitudes or uncomfortable sympathy. He just nodded, a simple acknowledgement that Marcus found oddly comforting. The warning bell rang, signaling 5 minutes until the next period. Students began clearing their tables, the noise level rising as chairs scraped against the floor. Marcus crumpled his lunch bag, suddenly aware that he just had the longest conversation with another student that he could remember having in months. "What class do you have next?" Noah asked as they stood up. "History with Finch." "I'm in the science building," Noah said, disappointment evident in his voice. He hesitated, then added, "But maybe we could meet up after school? If you want to, I could show you that game I'm working on." Marcus should say no. Getting closer to Noah would only put them both in Damon's crosshairs. The smart move would be to walk away now, go back to being invisible. But the hopeful look on Noah's face made it impossible. "Sure," Marcus found himself saying. "Where should I meet you?" "The library? I usually stay there until my dad finishes work." "Okay." Library after last bell. Noah beamed, his entire face lighting up as if Marcus had just offered him something precious instead of simply agreeing to hang out. "Great. See you then." He hurried off toward the science wing, a new bounce in his step. Marcus watched him go, an unfamiliar feeling settling in his chest. It took him a moment to identify it as something close to contentment. He'd made someone happy, such a simple thing, yet so foreign to his recent experience that it felt monumental. The feeling lasted precisely until he turned around and found himself face to face with Damon Reeves. "Making friends with the retard Wilson?" Damon asked, his voice deceptively casual. "Cute." Marcus felt heat rise to his face. "Don't call him that." Damon raised an eyebrow, a dangerous smile playing at his lips. "Grew a spine at lunch, did we?" He leaned closer, his breath hot against Marcus's ear. "Tyler's pissed." "Me too, actually. I don't like my crew being disrespected." "I wasn't—" "Shut up." Damon cut him off, his smile never wavering. "After school, behind the gym, we need to have a conversation about respect." He clapped Marcus on the shoulder, hard enough to make him wince. "Don't be late, and don't bring your little boyfriend." Then he was gone, swallowed by the crowd of students hurrying to their next classes. Marcus stood frozen, ice spreading through his veins. Behind the gym after school. He knew exactly what that meant. The bruise on his face would have company by dinner time. But for the first time beneath the familiar fear, Marcus felt something else stirring. A tiny flicker of resistance, of defiance. He'd stood up to Tyler for Noah. Maybe it was time to stand up for himself too. The thought terrified him almost as much as it exhilarated him. History class dragged by in a blur of dates and events that failed to penetrate the fog of dread surrounding Marcus. He tried to focus on Mr. Finch's lecture about the Civil War, but his mind kept returning to Damon's threat. Behind the gym after school, the same place where Marcus had received the bruise currently adorning his face. The same place where Jason had once had 2 ribs cracked by Damon's predecessor 3 years ago. As the final bell rang, Marcus faced a choice. Meet Damon behind the gym and take whatever was coming, or meet Noah in the library as promised. The smart choice would be Damon. Defying him would only make things worse. But the memory of Noah's smile, the simple pleasure of a shared lunch and conversation, pulled at something deep inside Marcus. For the first time in years, he'd connected with someone. The idea of disappointing Noah made his chest ache in a way that had nothing to do with anticipated bruises. Decision made, Marcus headed for the library. He'd deal with Damon tomorrow, or the next day, or whenever the reckoning came. For now, he would choose connection over fear. The library was quiet, the after-school crowd consisting mostly of students waiting for rides or finishing homework. Marcus spotted Noah immediately, hunched over a laptop at a table near the biography section, fingers flying across the keyboard. "Hey," Marcus said, sliding into the chair opposite him. Noah looked up, his face breaking into that same beaming smile. "You came." The surprise in his voice made something twist painfully in Marcus's chest. Had Noah expected to be stood up? Was he so used to disappointment that showing up as promised was noteworthy? "Said I would, didn't I?" Marcus replied, dropping his backpack beside the chair. "Yeah, but people say things all the time." Noah shrugged, a gesture too world-weary for his young face. Then he brightened, turning his laptop around. "Want to see what I'm working on?" For the next hour, Marcus forgot about Damon Reeves. He forgot about the threat hanging over his head, about his father's likely reaction to another black eye, about the calculus test he hadn't studied for. Instead, he lost himself in Noah's world of coding and game design, asking questions and watching in amazement as Noah demonstrated the game engine he'd built from scratch. "This is seriously impressive," Marcus said, meaning it. "How did you learn to do all this?" "YouTube tutorials mostly," Noah said with a hint of pride. And my dad helped a little. He's not a programmer, but he's good at figuring out problems. What does your dad do? A flicker of hesitation crossed Noah's face. He works at the school, he said vaguely. Administrative stuff. Before Marcus could ask for clarification, a shadow fell across their table. He looked up, expecting Damon or Tyler, his body tensing instinctively. Instead, he found himself staring at Principal Chen. Principal Chen had arrived at Westlake High just that September, replacing the retiring Principal Greaves. Unlike his predecessor, who had ruled from a distance with memos and announcements, Principal Chen was a visible presence in the hallways and cafeteria. He was known for his crisp suits, his direct gaze, and his zero-tolerance policy on bullying, though in Marcus's experience, such policies rarely protected kids like him. "Noah," Principal Chen said, his voice warm but tinged with confusion. "I was looking for you in the usual spot." "Sorry, Dad," Noah replied. "I was showing Marcus my game." "Dad." The word hit Marcus like a physical blow. Noah was Principal Chen's son, which meant he'd just spent lunch defending the principal's kid, and now he was sitting in the library with him, deep in conversation. A fact that would only fuel Damon's anger when he eventually caught up with Marcus. Principal Chen turned his attention to Marcus, his eyes immediately fixing on the bruise. Something flickered across his face. Recognition, concern, calculation. Too quick for Marcus to interpret. "Marcus Wilson, right?" he asked. Marcus nodded, suddenly unable to find his voice. "A P Physics and Calculus." Principal Chen continued. "Mr. Abernathy speaks very highly of your lab work." The fact that the principal knew his schedule and had apparently discussed him with teachers caught Marcus off guard. Thank you, sir," he managed. Principal Chen studied him for a moment longer, his expression unreadable. Then he turned back to Noah. "We should head home. Grandma's coming for dinner, remember?" Noah nodded, beginning to pack up his laptop. "Can Marcus come over sometime to play the new level I'm working on?" he asked with the direct simplicity of someone unused to social games. Principal Chen raised an eyebrow, glancing between the two boys. "If Marcus would like to," he said carefully. "I'd like that," Marcus said, surprising himself again. Despite the complication of Noah being the principal's son, he found he genuinely wanted to continue their friendship. Noah beamed. "Great. Maybe this weekend?" "Sure," Marcus agreed, ignoring the voice in his head screaming about the consequences of getting closer to Noah. "We'll work out the details later," Principal Chen said, a note of finality in his voice. "Nice to meet you properly, Marcus." As they walked away, Marcus caught Principal Chen leaning down to ask Noah a quiet question. Noah's animated response drifted back. "He helped me at lunch when Tyler Evans knocked my tray over." Principal Chen's back stiffened, but he said nothing more as they disappeared around a bookshelf. Marcus sat alone at the table, reality crashing back like a wave. He'd missed his appointment with Damon, and now he'd agreed to hang out with the principal's son over the weekend. His life had just gotten exponentially more complicated. With a heavy sigh, he shouldered his backpack and headed for the exit. The school hallways were mostly empty now, the afternoon light slanting through windows and painting rectangles of gold on the linoleum floor. Marcus moved quietly, hoping to make it to the bus stop without encountering. "There you are, Wilson." "Damon." "Of course." Marcus froze, then slowly turned around. Damon stood alone, unusual for him, his athletic frame backlit by the sun from the window behind him, making him look larger than life. "Thought we had a meeting," Damon said, his voice deadly quiet as he approached. "Waited 15 minutes. Made me look stupid." "I forgot." Marcus lied, taking an involuntary step backward. "Bullshit." "Damon Street. You're hanging out with that freak now. Principal's pet project." He closed the distance between them with alarming speed. "Bad enough you disrespected Tyler. Now you're ditching me for that loser." "He's not a loser," Marcus said, the words escaping before he could stop them. Damon's eyes widened slightly, genuine surprise flashing across his face before it hardened into anger. "What's happening to you, Wilson? Used to know your place." Marcus should apologize, should back down, but the afternoon with Noah had awakened something in him, a faint memory of who he used to be before he'd learned to make himself small and invisible. "Maybe I'm tired of my place," he said quietly. Damon's laugh was cold and sharp. "Is that right?" He reached out suddenly, shoving Marcus hard against the lockers. The metal rattled with the impact, the sound echoing down the empty hallway. "Let me remind you then." Marcus braced himself for the blow he knew was coming. Damon drew back his fist, his face twisted with anger. "What's going on here?" Principal Chen's voice cut through the tension like a knife. He stood at the end of the hallway, Noah a few steps behind him, both frozen in the act of returning to the library for something forgotten. Damon immediately stepped back, his expression transforming so quickly it was almost comical. "Nothing, sir," he said, his voice the perfect blend of respect and confusion. "Just talking with my buddy Marcus here." Principal Chen's eyes moved from Damon to Marcus, taking in his defensive posture against the lockers, then back to Damon again. "Mr. Reeves, I believe your wrestling practice started 10 minutes ago. Coach Delaney was looking for you." "Yes, sir. On my way now." Damon flashed his trademark smile, the one that charmed teachers and coaches, then turned to leave. As he passed Marcus, he whispered, too low for Principal Chen to hear, "This isn't over." Then he was gone, footsteps echoing down the hallway. Principal Chen approached slowly, his expression grave. "Are you all right, Marcus?" "Fine," Marcus mumbled, straightening his jacket and avoiding eye contact. "That bruise," Principal Chen said, gesturing to Marcus's face. "Did Damon Reeves do that?" Marcus hesitated. The instinct to protect himself, to deny, deflect, stay invisible, warred with a newfound desire to tell the truth. But years of experience had taught him that telling rarely solved anything, and often made things worse. "I fell," he said, the lie bitter on his tongue. During gym class, Principal Chen studied him for a long moment, clearly not believing him, but not pushing either. Noah, who had joined them, looked between his father and Marcus with wide, worried eyes. "If you ever want to talk," Principal Chen finally said, "my door is always open." "About anything." The emphasis on the last word made his meaning clear. Marcus nodded, not trusting himself to speak. "And the invitation for this weekend still stands," Principal Chen added, his tone lighter. "Noah could use a friend who appreciates his coding skills." "I'd like that," Marcus said, meaning it despite the complications. As he walked home later, taking the long route to avoid any potential encounters with Damon or his crew, Marcus found himself in uncharted emotional territory. For the first time in years, he felt something like hope flickering in his chest, fragile but persistent. At the same time, anxiety gnawed at him. He'd made himself visible today, had challenged the established order. There would be consequences, but he'd also made a friend, maybe his first real friend since middle school. The warm memory of shared conversation, of Noah's enthusiastic explanations and genuine smile, balanced against the cold dread of Damon's parting threat. Tomorrow would bring what it would bring. For tonight, Marcus allowed himself to focus on the positive. One small light in the darkness. It was more than he'd had yesterday. The weekend couldn't come soon enough for Marcus. Each school day became an exercise in avoidance and vigilance, as Damon and his crew seemed to materialize around every corner. Surprisingly, they hadn't made good on their threats yet. No ambushes behind the gym, no accidental collisions in the hallway. Instead, Damon watched him with calculating eyes, his customary smirk replaced by something more thoughtful and, paradoxically, more frightening. The only bright spots were lunch periods, which Marcus now spent with Noah. They'd claimed a table in the far corner of the cafeteria, and despite the occasional stare or whispered comment, no one bothered them directly. Whether this was due to Noah's connection to the principal or some other factor, Marcus couldn't say, but he welcomed the respite. On Friday afternoon, as the final bell rang, Noah caught up with him in the hallway. "Still coming tomorrow?" he asked, slightly breathless from running. "Yeah, if that's still okay." "Definitely. Dad's making his famous chili. He hardly ever cooks, so it's a big deal." Noah's enthusiasm was infectious. His earlier shyness around Marcus now completely evaporated. 2 o'clock? I'll text you the address." They exchanged phone numbers, another first for Marcus in recent memory, and parted ways at the school entrance. Saturday dawned bright and crisp, the November sky a clear, deep blue that belied the cold. Marcus spent the morning helping his father with yard work, clearing the last of the fall leaves and checking the gutters. Jason was coming home from college for Thanksgiving the following week, and their father was determined to have the house in order. Patrick Wilson was a quiet man, hardened by his wife's abandonment and the challenges of raising 2 boys alone. He worked long hours at the machine shop, his hands perpetually grease-stained and calloused. He wasn't cruel, but neither was he particularly demonstrative with affection. He provided food, shelter, the occasional new pair of shoes when the old ones wore through, and expected his sons to handle the rest. Going to a friend's house later, Marcus told him as they bagged the last pile of leaves. His father paused, regarding him with mild surprise. "That's so? Anyone I know?" "New kid, Noah Chen." Marcus hesitated, then added, "His dad's the principal at school." Patrick Wilson's eyebrows rose slightly. "Principal's kid, huh? Stepping up in the world." There was no malice in his tone, just faint amusement. "Be back for dinner. I'm doing pork chops." It was as close to approval as Marcus was likely to get. At precisely 1:55 p.m., Marcus stood on the front porch of a modest but well-maintained bungalow in one of the older neighborhoods near the school. He'd taken extra care with his appearance, wearing his newest jeans and the dark blue sweater Jason had sent him for his birthday. His hair, usually an untamed mop, had been wetted down and combed into some semblance of order. Before he could knock, the door swung open to reveal Noah, practically bouncing with excitement. "You're here! Come in!" He grabbed Marcus's arm, pulling him inside. "Dad's in the kitchen finishing the chili. I set up my gaming system in the living room, but I can show you my room first if you want. That's where I do most of my coding." The Chen home was warm and inviting, with walls painted in soft earth tones and bookshelves lining the living room. Family photos adorned the mantel. Noah at various ages, always accompanied by Principal Chen and a petite woman with Noah's same bright blue eyes and curly hair. Noah's mother, Marcus realized. The woman whose absence shaped their home, just as Marcus's mother's absence shaped his. Principal Chen emerged from the kitchen, wiping his hands on a dish towel. He looked different out of his usual suit. Dressed in jeans and a faded University of Michigan sweatshirt, more approachable, more human. "Marcus, welcome," he said warmly. "Glad you could make it. I hope you like chili." "Yes, sir. Thank you for having me." "David, please." "Surrey is for school." He gestured toward the kitchen. "We'll eat in about 30 minutes. Noah, why don't you show Marcus around?" Noah led Marcus on an enthusiastic tour of the house, culminating in his bedroom, a space that perfectly reflected its occupant. Posters of famous scientists and mathematicians shared wall space with video game art. A desk in the corner held a desktop computer with dual monitors, surrounded by notebooks filled with coding notes and game designs. "This is amazing," Marcus said, genuinely impressed. "My room's just a bed and a dresser, basically." Noah shrugged, though he looked pleased by the compliment. "Dad lets me decorate however I want. He says personal expression is important for development." He rolled his eyes good-naturedly. "He reads a lot of parenting books." They spent the next 20 minutes with Noah showing Marcus his latest coding project, their heads bent together over the computer screen. Noah explained his process with growing confidence, clearly delighted to have an audience who understood and appreciated his work. When Principal Chen, David, called them for lunch, they moved to the kitchen, where a pot of fragrant chili simmered on the stove. The three of them sat around a small table, passing cornbread and exchanging casual conversation. Marcus found himself relaxing, drawn in by the easy atmosphere and Noah's constant stream of commentary. "So Marcus," David said during a lull in the conversation, "Noah tells me you're quite the physicist. Mr. Abernathy mentioned you're one of his most promising students." Marcus felt heat rise to his face. "I just like understanding how things work," he said, uncomfortable with the praise. "He built this incredible model for the science showcase last year," Noah chimed in. "A working miniature hydroelectric generator. It was the best project there." Marcus blinked, surprised. "You saw that?" "Yeah. I was there with my old school for the inter-district competition." "Your project stood out because it was actually useful, not just flashy." David watched their exchange with quiet interest. "Have you thought about college, Marcus? With your aptitude for physics and engineering, you'd have some excellent options." The question caught Marcus off guard. College had always been a vague future concept, something that would presumably happen, but that he rarely thought about concretely. Jason had managed to get a partial scholarship to state, but their father had made it clear there wasn't money for much else. "Not really," Marcus admitted. "I mean, I guess I'll apply to state like my brother. If I can get some financial aid." "You should aim higher," David said, his tone matter-of-fact rather than judgmental. "MIT, Caltech, Stanford. Schools with strong engineering programs and substantial financial aid for qualified students." Marcus stared at him, momentarily speechless. The idea that he might aim for such schools had never occurred to him. They existed in a different universe, one inhabited by kids with perfect GPAs and parents who'd been saving for college since birth. I don't think I'm," he stammered. "You absolutely are," David countered firmly. "Your academic record is strong despite some uneven performance this year. Your standardized test scores are exceptional, and you have a natural aptitude that can't be taught." He leaned forward slightly. "Don't sell yourself short, Marcus. I've seen too many promising students do that." Something in David's direct gaze made Marcus squirm. It was as if the principal could see beneath the carefully constructed shell of indifference he'd built around himself. to the person he used to be. The kid who'd stayed up all night building complex Lego structures, who disassembled the family toaster just to see how it worked, who dreamed of designing revolutionary machines. "I'll think about it," he finally said, not wanting to argue but not fully believing either. David seemed to accept this for now. "Kinda good. And if you'd like some guidance with applications or scholarship essays, I'd be happy to help. It's literally my job," he added with a small smile. After lunch, Noah pulled Marcus back to the living room, where he'd set up his gaming system. For the next couple of hours, they lost themselves in cooperative gameplay, their earlier conversation about colleges and futures temporarily forgotten. Marcus found himself laughing more than he had in months, drawn into Noah's enthusiasm and quick humor. David appeared occasionally, offering snacks or making a dry comment about their gameplay that revealed he knew far more about video games than his principal persona would suggest. Each time, Marcus expected some return to the college discussion, some adult agenda hiding beneath the casual interaction, but it never came. David seemed content to let them be teenagers, absorbed in their game and burgeoning friendship. As afternoon faded toward evening, Marcus reluctantly noted the time. "I should probably head home soon. Told my dad I'd be back for dinner." "Already?" Noah's disappointment was evident. "But we haven't even tried the new level I designed." "Next time," Marcus promised, surprised by how much he was looking forward to a next time. David appeared in the doorway. "I can give you a ride home, Marcus, if that would help." The offer was casual, but something in David's tone made Marcus suspect an ulterior motive. Still, the alternative was a 30-minute walk, and the temperature had dropped considerably since his arrival. "That would be great. Thanks." Noah immediately volunteered to come along, but David shook his head. "I need you to start on that English paper that's due Monday," he said firmly. "I'll be back in 20 minutes. Noah's protests were overruled, and soon Marcus found himself in the passenger seat of David's sensible sedan, heading toward his neighborhood on the other side of town. For several minutes, they drove in silence, the radio playing quietly in the background. "I appreciate you befriending Noah," David finally said, his eyes on the road. "He's had a difficult time adjusting to the new school." "He's easy to be friends with," Marcus replied honestly. "He's probably the smartest person I've ever met." David smiled faintly. "He takes after his mother that way. She was a software engineer, brilliant, creative, always thinking 3 steps ahead of everyone else." The fondness in his voice was tinged with lingering grief. "But social connections don't come as naturally to him as coding does. He struggles to read people sometimes." Marcus nodded, thinking of Noah's direct questions and occasional social missteps. "He seems to do okay to me." "He's getting better," David agreed. But middle school was challenging. He was younger than his classmates, more intellectually advanced but less socially developed. And kids can be cruel when they encounter difference. The unspoken parallel hung between them. Marcus understood being a target all too well. "Which brings me to something I wanted to discuss with you," David continued, his tone shifting slightly. "That bruise on your face last week, and what I interrupted between you and Damon Reeves in the hallway." Marcus tensed, his momentary comfort evaporating. "It was nothing," he mumbled automatically. David's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "It wasn't nothing, Marcus. And it's not the first time, is it?" Marcus stared out the passenger window, watching the familiar streets of his neighborhood slide by. Houses smaller and more weathered than the Chens, yards less kempt. The physical manifestation of the distance between his world and Noah's. "Marcus," David prompted quietly when the silence stretched too long. "I want to help, but I can't if you won't talk to me." "No offense, sir, David, but teachers and principals always say that. And then nothing changes. Or it gets worse." The words came out more bitter than he'd intended. David pulled the car to the curb, still several blocks from Marcus's house, and turned off the engine. He shifted in his seat to face Marcus directly. "I understand your skepticism," he said, his voice low and serious. "System fails kids like you and Noah far too often. Adults look the other way because it's easier, or they make token efforts that don't address the real problem." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "But I'm not just speaking as your principal right now. I'm speaking as Noah's father. You stood up for my son when no one else would. You befriended him when he was alone. That matters to me, Marcus. It matters a great deal." The intensity in David's eyes made Marcus look away. "Damon Reeves and his friends have been bullying you," David stated rather than asked. "The bruise. The confrontation I interrupted. It's been going on for some time, hasn't it?" Marcus remained silent, but his lack of denial was answer enough. "I thought so." David sighed. "Why haven't you reported it?" A humorless laugh escaped Marcus before he could stop it. And make it worse. No thanks. It would not make it worse, David said firmly. Not on my watch. With all due respect, you don't know that. Marcus countered, a flash of anger giving him courage. Damon's dad is on the school board. His mom runs half the parent committees. He's the star wrestler with college scouts already interested. And I'm just... He gestured vaguely at himself, unable to find the words. You're just a brilliant young man with enormous potential who deserves to walk the halls of my school without fear. David finished for him, his voice quiet but intense. And I don't care who Damon's parents are, or how many trophies he's won. In my school, everyone is held to the same standard of behavior. Marcus wanted to believe him. The conviction in David's voice was compelling, different from the empty platitudes he'd heard from other adults. But years of experience had taught him that hope was dangerous. Look, David continued, his tone softening slightly. I'm not asking you to make a formal complaint today. I'm just asking you to consider trusting me, to believe that things can be different. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a business card, handing it to Marcus. My cell number's on the back. Day or night, if you need help, call me. Marcus took the card wordlessly, turning it over in his fingers. And regardless of what you decide about Damon, David added, the invitation to our house stands. Noah considers you a friend, and so do I. They drove the remaining distance to Marcus's house in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. As they pulled up to the curb, Marcus gathered his courage for one last question. Why? He asked, his hand on the door handle. Why do you care about this? About, me? David seemed to consider the question carefully before answering. Because 25 years ago, I was you, Marcus. Different school, different bullies, but the same situation. And someone stepped in when I needed it most. They changed the course of my life. His eyes met Marcus's, steady and sincere. Sometimes all it takes is one person to believe in you, to show you possibilities you couldn't see for yourself. Marcus nodded slowly, not trusting himself to speak. He climbed out of the car, then leaned down to the open window. Thanks for the ride. And lunch. Anytime, David replied. See you Monday. As Marcus watched the car pull away, he felt the weight of the business card in his pocket. One person to believe in you? The words echoed in his mind, stirring something that felt dangerously like hope. Monday morning arrived with leaden skies and a cold drizzle that matched Marcus's mood perfectly. He'd spent Sunday alternating between homework and anxious rumination about his conversation with Principal Chen. Part of him wanted to believe that things could change, that there might be an adult who would actually stand up to Damon and his crew. Another part, the part hardened by years of disappointment, warned him not to get his hopes up. As he approached the school, hunched against the rain, a familiar voice called his name. Noah stood beneath the overhang by the main entrance, waving enthusiastically. Hey! Dad said he dropped you off Saturday. Did you finish that physics problem set? I was trying to help my dad with his car yesterday and kept thinking about torque calculations. Noah's cheerful chatter continued as they walked inside together, drawing curious glances from other students. Being seen with Noah was a public declaration of their friendship, Marcus realized. A statement he wasn't sure he was ready to make. Yet as Noah talked, his face animated with genuine excitement about physics concepts most of their classmates would find painfully dull, Marcus found it impossible to regret their connection. There was something refreshing about Noah's authenticity, his complete lack of concern for social hierarchies and unwritten rules. They parted ways at Noah's locker, agreeing to meet for lunch. As Marcus turned toward his own locker, he nearly collided with Tyler Evans. "Watch it, Wilson," Tyler snapped, shoving Marcus back a step. Marcus tensed, expecting more, but Tyler merely sneered and continued down the hall. The encounter was brief but unsettling. Something felt off about Tyler's behavior. The usual extended intimidation routine cut short, as if he had somewhere more important to be. The morning passed without incident, though Marcus remained hyper-aware of his surroundings, braced for the retaliation he was certain was coming. By lunchtime, his nerves were frayed from constant vigilance. He entered the cafeteria cautiously, scanning for Damon and his crew. They occupied their usual table near the center of the room, but something was different. The typical boisterous laughter and dominance displays were subdued, replaced by heads bent in serious conversation. Damon glanced up, caught Marcus looking, and held his gaze for a long moment before deliberately turning away. "They're being weird today," Noah observed, appearing at Marcus's elbow with his lunch tray. "Tyler didn't even try to trip me in the hallway earlier." They found a table in their usual corner, and Noah launched into a detailed explanation of his weekend coding progress. Marcus tried to focus, but his attention kept drifting to Damon's table, where the unusual quiet continued. So I think if I reconfigure the physics engine, I can make the water effects more realistic. Noah was saying. Are you listening? Sorry, Marcus said, dragging his attention back. Just distracted. Noah followed his gaze to Damon's table. They're not going to bother us, he said with quiet certainty. How do you know? My dad talked to Damon this morning. I saw them in his office when I dropped off his lunch. Marcus stared at him. What? Why didn't you tell me? Noah shrugged. Didn't seem important. Dad talks to students all the time. But it was important, and they both knew it. Principal Chen had acted on their conversation, despite Marcus never making a formal complaint. A cold knot formed in Marcus's stomach. If Damon believed Marcus had reported him, the rest of the day passed in a haze of dread. Marcus expected ambush at every turn, but none came. Instead, Damon and his friends maintained a strange, watchful distance. When the final bell rang, Marcus packed up slowly, reluctant to leave the relative safety of the classroom. Marcus? Mr. Abernathy, his physics teacher, called as he headed for the door. Could you stay a moment? Assuming it was about the upcoming lab assignment, Marcus approached the desk. Yes, sir? Mr. Abernathy waited until the last student had left before speaking. Principal Chen mentioned you might be interested in applying to some top engineering programs for college. So this was David's next move, recruiting teachers to push the college agenda. Marcus suppressed a sigh. He mentioned it, yeah. I think it's an excellent idea. Mr. Abernathy said, his enthusiasm genuine. Your work in my class has been exceptional, especially your practical applications. The hydroelectric generator you built last year showed real insight. Marcus shifted uncomfortably under the praise. Thanks. I'd be happy to write you a recommendation letter when the time comes. Mr. Abernathy continued. And if you'd like some additional projects to strengthen your application, I have some ideas. He pulled a folder from his desk. This is information about a summer engineering program at MIT, fully funded for qualified students. The application deadline is in February, but it's competitive. I'd be willing to mentor you through the process. Marcus accepted the folder wordlessly, stunned by the offer. Mr. Abernathy had never shown this level of interest in his academic future before. Think about it. Mr. Abernathy said with a kind smile. You have potential, Marcus. Real potential. It would be a shame to waste it. There it was again. That dangerous, alluring idea that he might be more than just the invisible kid who did Damon's homework and tried to avoid beatings. That he might have a future beyond what he'd allowed himself to imagine. I'll think about it, Marcus promised, tucking the folder into his backpack. The hallways were nearly empty as he made his way to his locker. He'd missed the bus and would have to walk home, but the rain had stopped at least. As he turned the corner, he froze. Damon stood by Marcus's locker alone. His posture was relaxed, almost casual, but there was nothing casual about his presence in an otherwise deserted hallway. For a moment, Marcus considered turning around, finding another exit. But that would only delay the inevitable. Drawing a deep breath, he approached his locker. Reeves, he acknowledged stiffly, reaching for his combination lock. Wilson. Damon's voice was neutral, lacking its usual edge of contempt. Heard you had a chat with Principal Chen. And there it was. The confrontation Marcus had been dreading. He kept his eyes on his lock, fingers suddenly clumsy with tension. I didn't report you, if that's what you're thinking. Didn't say you did. Damon shifted, leaning his shoulder against the neighboring locker. But Chen called me into his office this morning anyway. Interesting conversation. Marcus said nothing, focusing on retrieving his jacket and the books he needed for homework. He showed me some footage. Damon continued. Security cameras in the hallways. Pretty clear video of me shoving you into those lockers last week. And a few other incidents. Marcus froze, his hand still inside his locker. He hadn't known about security cameras. Or maybe he had, but assumed, like most students, that they were rarely monitored. Chen had quite a file. Damon went on, his tone still strangely conversational. Dates, times, witness statements he's been quietly collecting. 3 months worth. He gave a low whistle. Guy's been playing the long game. Marcus finally looked at Damon directly, trying to gauge his mood. To his surprise, there was no anger in Damon's expression, just a sort of rueful resignation. What did he do? Marcus asked cautiously. Gave me a choice, Damon replied. Option 1, formal disciplinary hearing, probable suspension. Note in my permanent record that colleges and wrestling scouts would definitely see. He ticked off the points on his fingers. Option 2, 6 weeks of mandatory counseling sessions, community service hours, and a behavior contract with weekly check-ins. Wes, what did you choose? Damon snorted. What do you think? I'm not an idiot. Community service looks good on college applications anyway. He straightened up, no longer leaning on the locker. But that's not all. He made it very clear that if he hears about anyone giving you or his kid trouble, even if it's not directly from me, I'm back to option one. And he'll make sure Coach Delaney benches me for the rest of the season. Marcus stared at him, trying to process this information. Principal Chen had intervened decisively but strategically, giving Damon a face-saving way out while still ensuring protection for Marcus and Noah. So here we are, Damon continued. You and me having a civilized conversation in an empty hallway. Is this where you threatened me to keep quiet about our civilized conversation? Marcus asked, unable to keep the bitterness from his voice. To his surprise, Damon laughed, a short, genuine sound without malice. Nope. This is where I tell you we're done. No more homework assignments, no more meetings behind the gym. I leave you alone, you leave me alone. He shrugged. Simple as that. It couldn't be that simple. Nothing in Marcus's experience had prepared him for this outcome. A bully backing down, an adult actually intervening effectively, the possibility of walking the school hallways without constant fear. Why are you telling me this? Marcus asked, his suspicion evident. Why not just stay away? Damon was quiet for a moment, his usual swagger giving way to something more thoughtful. Chen said something that stuck with me, he finally admitted, about how the person I am now doesn't have to be the person I am forever, that I'm making choices that will shape who I become. He shook his head, as if surprised by his own words. Sounded like something from a motivational poster, but I don't know. Made me think. He pushed off from the locker, adjusting his backpack. Anyway, we're good, Wilson. Tell the principal's kid we're good too. I've got better things to do than waste my time on you two. With that, he walked away, leaving Marcus staring after him in disbelief. The next few weeks brought changes so gradual yet profound that Marcus sometimes had to remind himself they were real. True to his word, Damon maintained a distance that eventually evolved from wary truce to casual indifference. The bruise on Marcus's face faded, and no new ones appeared to replace it. The constant knot of tension between his shoulder blades slowly loosened. His friendship with Noah deepened, extending beyond their shared lunch table to weekend gaming sessions and collaborative physics projects. Noah's enthusiasm and uncomplicated acceptance reminded Marcus of who he used to be, before years of bullying and isolation had taught him to make himself small and unnoticeable. And then there was David Chen. True to his promise, he became more than just a principal to Marcus, offering guidance on college applications, arranging a meeting with an MIT alumnus who lived locally, even helping Marcus secure a part-time internship at an engineering firm for the following summer. Each interaction reinforced the message David had delivered in the car that day. You are more than what your bullies made you believe. You have potential worth nurturing. As Thanksgiving approached, Marcus found himself in the unprecedented position of actually looking forward to returning to school after the break. The thought would have been inconceivable just a month earlier. You seem different, his father commented the night before Thanksgiving, as they worked together preparing vegetables for the next day's meal. Jason was due home from college later that evening, and their small house hummed with an unusual energy of anticipation. Marcus looked up from the potatoes he was peeling. Different how? Patrick Wilson regarded his son thoughtfully, his weathered hands pausing in the act of trimming green beans. Happier, maybe. More like how you used to be, before your mother left. The observation, delivered in his father's characteristically direct manner, caught Marcus off guard. His father rarely referenced their family's fracturing, and never in terms of how it had affected his sons emotionally. I guess I am happier, Marcus acknowledged, returning to his potatoes. Things are better at school. That Chen kid? Noah, yeah. And his dad's been helping me look at colleges, engineering programs. Marcus hesitated, then added, Mr. Abernathy thinks I could get into MIT with a scholarship. If I do this summer program first, he braced himself for dismissal or skepticism, the usual response when he'd ventured to share ambitions in the past. Instead, his father was quiet for a long moment. MIT, huh? He finally said. Your mother always said you had a mind for building things, even when you were little. The casual mention of his mother's belief in him, a memory Marcus had either forgotten or buried, sent an unexpected pang through his chest. Principal Chen thinks so too, Marcus said, focusing intently on a particularly stubborn potato eye. He says I have potential. Patrick nodded slowly. He's right. He set down his knife, turning to face Marcus fully. Listen, son, I know I haven't always been available. After your mother left, I had to work extra shifts just to keep a roof over our heads. Didn't leave much time for college planning or school activities. His voice held no self-pity, just a statement of facts as he saw them. But I've always been proud of you. Both you boys. And if MIT is where you want to go, we'll figure out how to make it happen. The simple declaration of support, delivered without fanfare or excessive emotion in typical Wilson fashion, meant more to Marcus than any elaborate promise could have. It was solid, dependable, like his father himself. Thanks, Dad, he said, the words inadequate for the warmth spreading through his chest. They returned to their vegetable prep in companionable silence, the moment of connection settling between them like a foundation being quietly reinforced. Later that evening, as the three Wilson men sat around their small dining table sharing a late dinner with Jason, who had arrived full of college stories and newfound independence, Marcus felt a sense of contentment that had been absent from their home for years. Not everything was perfect. His mother's absence still left a void, and years of emotional distance between father and sons couldn't be bridged in a single conversation. But it was a start, a foundation to build upon. As they cleared the dishes, Jason pulled Marcus aside. Seriously, what's going on with you? He asked quietly. Dad said things are better at school, but you seem like a completely different person. Marcus considered how to explain the transformation of the past month, from isolated target to someone with friends, academic prospects, and a growing sense of self-worth. How could he articulate the impact of Noah's friendship or David's mentorship? The freedom of walking school hallways without constant fear? I stood up for someone, he finally said, the simplicity of the statement belying its significance. And it changed everything. Jason raised an eyebrow, clearly expecting more, but Marcus just smiled. Some experiences couldn't be fully explained. They had to be lived. The Monday after Thanksgiving break, Marcus arrived at school to find Noah waiting by his locker, practically vibrating with excitement. There you are, Noah exclaimed. I've been waiting forever. I had this amazing idea over break for our physics project. What if instead of just building a standard model, we create a working prototype that actually demonstrates practical applications? Dad says we could enter it in the state engineering competition if it's good enough, and winners get noticed by college recruiters and... Breathe, Noah. Marcus interrupted with a laugh, the sound still unfamiliar, but increasingly natural. Let me put my stuff away first, then you can tell me all about it. As he opened his locker, he caught sight of Damon Reeves further down the hallway. Their eyes met briefly, and Damon gave a small, almost imperceptible nod before continuing on his way. Not friendship, not forgiveness, but acknowledgement of the new equilibrium between them. Noah was still talking, sketching ideas in the air with animated gestures. Principal Chen passed by, catching Marcus's eye with a warm smile and subtle wink before continuing toward his office. And Marcus, opening his physics textbook to the day's assignment, felt something he'd almost forgotten existed. A sense of possibility, of future paths opening before him, of rightness in his own skin. One small act of courage had indeed changed everything. A bullied teen had stood up for a kid, not realizing the victim's dad was the school principal. But more importantly, he hadn't realized that in defending someone else, he would finally begin to find himself again. In the crowded hallway of Westlake High, surrounded by the ordinary chaos of a Monday morning, Marcus Wilson smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes and lightened his heart. Whatever challenges lay ahead, he would face them standing tall, no longer invisible, no longer alone.